Meagan Avitable. She's going to explain what an IEP is, what they're used for, and what parents need to know if their child is ever put in this program. So Meagan, thank you so much. I think it's such a great topic because a lot of times when we get into the school age, we don't know what any of these terms are, how serious they can be, what our rights are as parents, just questions we might need to ask when it comes to the education and support and resources that our children need in the public school system. So I think this is such a great topic for people to understand, especially if it's because it's so nuanced. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me about this today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
I am so excited. First, tell me a little bit about your professional and educational background. How did you get into all this?
So I started teaching about 10 years ago, and I just started in a general education classroom setting. I was mostly with K to 2 throughout the time that I was in general education, and I just started working. When you're in general education, you don't really understand how each student is so different. It's something that you kind of start to learn. And my second year of teaching, I had students with exceptionalities. And so working with them kind of showed me a little bit more about showed me something like I liked, like small groups. I liked teaching in a small group, and I really enjoyed honing in on one skill and helping a student make progress on that one skill more than I enjoyed a whole curriculum that I had to teach and forward sound,
Yeah.
So that kind of led me to become a varying exceptionalities teacher, which is someone who works with students with exceptionalities that are in general education classrooms. So it's inclusion. I got my master's in educational leadership, and I have my certification in ESC K-12. But really what led me to it is when I started working with the students in my classroom.
Yeah, that's awesome. I could never be a teacher. I say that all the time, but whew,
It's hard.
Yeah. Whew, I can't even teach my kid. I'm like trying to count coins with him the other day, and I'm like, no, that's a penny. No, that's a penny. Like, what do you mean? It's a penny. It looks different than all the other coins. Like,
oh yes, the ridges help with some of that.
Yes. So why did you feel compelled to support students with special needs?
Yeah, so kind of as I touched on when I was a classroom teacher, the students who were receiving the special education services, they weren't getting appropriately supported. So my kids had their own VE teacher, or varying exceptionalities teacher, who was supposed to be coming into the room, providing support during small group time, and also she could pull students out of the room to work with them as needed. And she was not doing a very good job. So I went to my principal and said, I want to be the VE teacher next year. What do I have to do? I took a test, and then the rest is history as far as that goes. And I really am glad I did it, because advocating for my students during the time I was teaching them, was really great. And it led me here because, I can advocate on a larger scale.
I think that's really important that, I talk about this with my husband all the time because, where to send your kid. My son will be going into kindergarten next year. And it's like, there are a lot of incredible teachers out there, but a lot of times the student's learning style is not the teacher's, like the way the information is presented. And it's like, how do you find the best environment for your child, like regardless? Because one of the things I love that you said is, from the onset, is like every kid is different. So in this general education, there could be 30 different kids who need 30 different ways of information being presented. And it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent or not capable, but they just might not be understanding the delivery. So how do you, as a teacher and educator, manage that? And how do you, as a parent, support your child? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, there are learning style type quizzes. And some teachers do those in the beginning of the year to kind of see, they can group their kinesthetic learners kind of together. Because yeah, everybody's different regardless of if they have an exceptionality, if they don't, if they're just, if they're gifted. I mean, everything is different. So you have to kind of learn who each of your students is so that you can be the most effective teacher.
Again, not a task I would be good
Yeah.
at. Oh man. So let's talk a little bit about the language and what it means, because it has changed so much in the last 20 years since I was, I'm 30 years since I was in elementary school. I had to think about that for a second. Crap. Let's talk about what ESE exceptionalities means, as well as what an IEP is.
So ESE means exceptional student education. So a student who has an IEP, which is an individual education plan, if they have a 504 plan, or if they're gifted, they would fall under the umbrella of ESE. And that does get them some resources from the state. It can help them in that regard, and it gets them services in their school because they have these plans. So an IEP, an individualized education plan, in order to get one, students have to first kind of be identified by their teacher as maybe they're needing just a little more support. So there's like different tiers. So tier 1 is everyone. Then tier 2 is just like a little bit of extra support. And then there's tier 3, which are students who have been identified as needing more than that extra support. And once they're identified, they go through a 6-week process with the teacher collecting data on a specific skill. And so that's called RTI, or response to intervention. So the teacher provides the intervention, and if the student does not make the progress that the school is looking for, then they will move on to the evaluation step.
Okay.
And that is a school psychologist doing an evaluation. It could be a speech and language pathologist. It could be both. It could be an occupational therapist. The evaluation, when you're consenting for that, is just that they are going to do some observations, evaluations to determine if your student is eligible. Then they get consent for the actual IEP, and they write that in a meeting with you and go over the reports. Then your student can receive services. The 504 is different. It's much easier, but also it doesn't give you as much. So an IEP provides your student with the option of having special education services like a VE teacher going into the classroom, pulling students out or pushing in to work with them. The 504 plan does not. So that's really the main difference is those services. A 504, you walk in with a medical diagnosis, let's say ADHD. So your student, you think, may not need much support in class, but when they have to take a test, they need support. So that's when you would walk in and get a 504 plan. You create it in a meeting with the 504 coordinator. You talk about things that your student needs to be successful, and then they would just write it all down and you would have it. So much faster and much easier, but it is like a lot less support.
Got it. Now, is there a way that like a 504 could eventually lead to an IEP? Does that ever happen?
Yeah, so if your student has a 504, like let's say for a year, and their grades aren't, they're not doing well, or you see they're struggling, if they're struggling socially or emotionally in the classroom, then they would start the IEP process.
Got it.
It wouldn't necessarily just be changed. It wouldn't be as long as the original, like, if you start just from scratch, but it would still be a process to change it. But it can go, like, you'd never have both. But you can decide you need to move forward towards an IEP, lose the 504, and then go that way.
Okay. So if there's like no change, or like somewhere down the line within the class or school year, you can see that there's like no change, like a downward spiral or something, that's when you could probably like reevaluate and go to an IEP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This is all news to me. So I have no idea what anything is.
I know, and it's a lot. It is.
Yes.
But that's why I'm here.
And then, so from that, the teacher perspective, can you give me the VE teacher? Varying
Exceptionalities. So,
okay.
An exceptionality is something like autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
So when it's just varying exceptionalities, that means that you work with students who have all exceptionalities. So, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, you could have OHI, which means other health impaired, which if a student is like, if they're only diagnosed with like an anxiety disorder or ADHD, they might put them in that exceptionality, the other health impaired, because like there are little loopholes that the school will sometimes use to get the student an IEP, even if they don't necessarily fall into this category.
Got it.
Because of course there are categories. And yeah, so the teacher, it just means that you're going to work with all of the students who have an IEP in that room.
And that would be different from like a literacy coach or like a reading.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So a literacy coach is going to work like with the whole group and with small group. They may not necessarily pull ESE students into a literacy, especially if they're doing an intervention, like a reading intervention, because the students with IEPs already get support from the ESE teacher. They sometimes say, because the intervention kids can be much larger group, so the literacy coach may only pull from students without IEPs, but who are struggling.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And then the speech and language pathologist would be totally different entity too, depending. All right. Whew.
Yeah.
So many things. So how would a parent know what to ask for or advocate for in an IEP versus a 504? Is there any
they would call me.
And let's think, why would they need to call you?
No, I mean, so if they want one, basically. So if all they really have to do is submit a request in writing that says that I would like to hold a meeting to discuss an IEP, or I would like to hold a meeting to discuss a 504, and then the rest, just happens naturally.
So so that's actually a really good answer, because does the parent need to wait for the school, and obviously you're saying no, if they feel like the school is missing something, they can step up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because parents know their kids the best. Yeah. And that's what's hard as a parent. You're watching your kiddo struggle in school, and that they need help, and the school doesn't work fast enough. And so that's another reason I went into advocacy, is because the school can they can have 6 weeks for response to intervention, and then 60 days for evaluation. Ooh. And that's a long time for a kiddo to be in school without support and struggling. It can be damaging, because if they're frustrated every day, if they're anxious, if they're failing, all of these things can do damage to a kiddo, to their self-esteem and to how they're feeling. So sometimes it's really good to keep on them about that, because to be compliant as a school, they need to stay within those guidelines. Wow. But there is a teacher shortage, and so they like to use all sorts of different things to say that, I know it's a little bit outside of the window, but we got it done. So be the parent that is on top of it. Keep your dates, write down the dates of when meetings happen, when you sign consent. That's really important date, so that you can, stay on top of the school.
No, I think that's really excellent insight. I had a friend who was a speech and language pathologist for I think Duval County schools, and she would say like fighting to get her kids what they needed sometimes was more work than the actual, you know, support process, like to
Yeah.
be there for those kids. She was like, it was just, you can see it, and people would just pass them through. And then by the time they're in fourth or fifth grade, they still can't read. They're still at like first grade reading level, and they're sitting down to take a test. They don't understand the words.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
And that is a huge problem, especially in our state. The amount of non-readers that are in third grade right now
Yeah.
because of the COVID year and the
Yeah.
year after, um, it's a very large number, and it's scary because there aren't enough like interventions to be done. There aren't
Mm,
enough supports to be given, and retaining is not the answer, especially in third grade. It is not, I don't agree with retaining in third grade. Retaining in K1 or 2 is the only time it's going to be beneficial to a student,
okay.
because they can be learning the basic skills. Second is even a little bit trickier, but because by second, you're going to start reading to learn more than learning to read. So,
Oh,
yeah, so she's completely
interesting.
right that they push kids through. I mean, yeah, the things I've seen.
Yeah, that could be another
But
podcast for
that's
another
exactly,
day. I can
exactly.
imagine.
Yeah, because the No Child Left Behind, while it's a great thought,
Yeah.
it it does just mean pushing kids through, and they're not ready when they get to some of these really difficult grades.
Mm,
And then,
that's a really good note
yeah.
too. And not to just pick on the state of Florida, because I have a friend who's a reading coach in Texas, and or literacy coach, I guess is the whatever.
Depend. I mean, every
Yeah,
area calls it something different.
something like that.
Yeah.
And she was saying like she went from being like a fourth grade classroom teacher to a literacy coach, and she was like the just the gap from reading and writing, like the physically holding a pencil and having kids like be able to write their name, understanding their letters was, she said, horrific when they went back
Mhm.
into the classroom. She's like, it just blew my mind how much that the screen just you
Yeah.
lose you lose so much.
Oh, don't get me started on screens. Yeah.
Ooh, there's so many rabbit holes here. Oh man.
Yes, yes, I told you. I'm staying on topic. I am not going down a rabbit hole.
We might come back to some of these. So when it comes to an IEP or 504 plan, are these forever programs, or is there a chance that students can come off of them eventually?
Yeah, they don't have to last forever. A student can close their gaps. They can master therapy goals, like especially because you can have an IEP that is only speech and language.
Okay.
So if you have a speech impairment, you'll have an IEP, and you may master those goals, and I don't want to say clear your impairment, but like they'll close out the IEP because you no longer need speech,
Mm-hmm.
because that is really something that um, it is not easy to close a gap, but it is easier than an academic gap, because it's something where you're working on your mouth movements and your
Mm-hmm.
tongue placements and things like that. So
Yeah.
those can be eventually corrected.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even with an IEP for academics, some students may just have like a specific learning disabled as an exceptionality, and that just means that they've shown that they struggle more in one subject than the other. So
Mm.
because we've been saying reading, let's say math. So let's say they
Okay.
struggle in math, but they do very well in reading. They may, I would say, maybe takes like 2 to 3 years, but they may have that moment where everything kind of clicks,
Mm.
and they bridge the gap and they catch up, and then they would go on consultation. So
Mm.
before an IEP is just ended, the student services would go from either support facilitation when you're in the classroom, or resource pullout when you're out of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Those would change to be consultation, because you want to just make sure that without your services and your support, that the student's going to be okay. So,
Mm,
you keep them on consultation sometimes for a year because again, you don't need to give up an IEP. Keeping it forever doesn't hurt anyone
mm,
because it only benefits.
right.
It
Have that
doesn't mean
extra.
that you're going to have any kind of a different diploma or anything like that. It just benefits a kid and gives them support all the way up into college even. I mean, you can have
Mm,
an IEP that goes into college and helps you there.
wow.
Um, and a lot of parents, I think, don't really think, that far. They just kind of more want to, they're like, oh, like I really just don't want you to have this. Some people think it's a stigma, and it really
Mm.
isn't, but some people think it's a stigma. But really, I think it's just keep them on like consult and collect that data to see, and then if they're good, they're good.
That's actually a really good rabbit hole to kind of go down. It is like demystifying the stigmas that are associated with certain, I guess, classroom issues or
Hmm.
exceptional student issues. But also, what should a parent like look for as a red flag if their kid, like in their kid, if there's to know there's even an issue, I wouldn't know.
Yeah. What to look for? So,
Yeah.
okay, so let's think of like, let's think second grade. Okay,
Okay.
so if your student is going into second grade
Hmm.
and they are still struggling with blending CVC, which means consonant, vowel, consonant. So if
Okay.
they're struggling to blend hop, get them an IEP
Okay.
because, well, okay, so COVID really kind of messed with that reasoning, but typically,
Okay.
if they're going into second, that should have been mastered almost in kindergarten. It's
Okay.
it's like it's like end of kindergarten going into first is just that CVC word.
Mm.
If they are struggling with single digit math and they're going into second grade, get them evaluated, get them, because you can always have the evaluation done. You can have a private evaluation done. Those
Hmm.
have wait lists, those can be expensive. Um, but you can also go down the road to an IEP and still be found ineligible. So it doesn't hurt. Like it never hurts to say to the school, this is happening at home.
Hmm.
Are you seeing this in the classroom? And then I'd like us to collect some data of what you're seeing in the classroom. Let's meet in a month and I want to discuss, the next steps to moving into either, maybe an IEP or whatever support.
Hmm.
Um, if they are crying every morning going to school,
Mm.
they may need a social emotional IEP. You know, um, a lot of
Oh, good
kiddos have
point.
anxiety now, and an anxiety disorder can also mean you need an IEP. Because if you're
Huh.
a ball of anxiety every single day at school,
Yeah.
you're not learning, you're just
Excellent.
stressed.
Excellent point.
So a 504 can get them some supports like, having a stress ball, having a fidget spinner, taking breaks, things like that. But maybe
Hmm.
they also need to be pulled out and in with a VE teacher, learning strategies to help manage themselves, how to
Mm.
calm down. So yeah, if you're noticing things that are different, that are
Mm.
concerning,
Those
then
are
just
good ones.
ask. Yeah.
Those are good. Those are good news. I didn't even think about like the anxiety side of it and
Yeah.
being
Yeah, I
stressed.
mean,
Yeah.
having an anxiety disorder is fairly generalized. I
Hmm.
mean, literally, I think there is just a generalized anxiety disorder. I believe that's a name of one. So
Yes,
it's
it is.
like,
Yeah.
and I think I am not a doctor, but like I feel like with everything that happens in the world, in schools, or I won't say the world, in our country, in
Yeah, in our
schools,
country. Mm.
and everything that happened with COVID and stuff, I think that a lot of kids are having reactions and
Mm.
they've learned about things and they have, fear. And they may not know how to explain that because they're kids. They may
Hmm.
not have the right language. And they don't have the calming strategies to work through it themselves. So they might need help. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not even necessarily something that may last forever, but just kids need help. That's
Well,
the moral of my story.
that's a good point. That's a good point though. Like they say like toddlers and like young children they have meltdowns and tantrums because that's their way of dealing with
Mm-hmm.
emotions. And they don't know how to express like fear, anger, sadness sometimes
Yeah.
properly. And like for my son, the other morning he always wears my tennis shirts. I like to play tennis. And so he always wants to wear one over his clothes. And so I get super frustrated, right? Because that's more laundry. I need my stuff too, right? And so the other day when I was like mad that he put on a dirty tennis shirt to go to school. And I was like, wear dirty clothes, right? There's a point to this story, I promise. And flew off the handle. I got really angry because we were running late, da da da. And I calmed down. I came out to the car and I gave him a clean one and I said, Declan, I really need you to help me understand why this is so important that you wear it every day. And I said, Mommy's trying to learn why you feel this is so important because I don't want to keep getting frustrated with you. So is there something else we can wear? And he said, it took him a couple of minutes and he goes, well, Mommy, I just want to be comfortable and cozy. And I was like, so you can like snuggle it? Yeah, Mommy, because I want to be close to you. And I was like, oh man.
Yeah. And then you went and ordered like 7 more shirts, right?
I was like, okay, are they clean? Like
Some Febreze.
exactly, right? And some stain stick, right? And but that was just I think an opportunity for me as the parent to take a step back and give my son the opportunity to speak his feelings and like give him a safe space. But also it was asking very specific questions to get things out of him because of this behavior that's very kind of obtuse, right? That's not a lot of kids, especially little boys, don't want to wear long tennis shirts over their clothes.
Yeah.
That's not a normal thing.
Yeah.
But that's
so it was
okay.
like
Yeah.
It was like him bringing like a stuffy to school,
Yeah.
something comforting for him. And maybe it helped him remember, okay, he was going to see you again at the end of the day.
Yeah, something
You
like
know?
But and so that just goes back to your point that kids don't always have the words
Nope.
to say help me or I'm
Yeah.
scared or I'm lonely or I'm tired or any of those things. So that's just a really, I think, good note that you brought up. Let's talk a little bit about any misconceptions that parents might have about an IEP or 504 and or anything that you might have come in contact over the years where you're like, no, that's completely bogus.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned one thing as far as diplomas.
Mm-hmm.
So unless your student is on the Access Points curriculum, which Access Points is for students with an IQ, right now it's 62,
Okay.
62 and below, they can get on Access Points. And that means it's a completely different curriculum.
Oh, wow.
So it's I'm not going to say simplified. It's like broken down.
Okay.
So they will work on the similar standards, but they may work on a third of it instead of the whole standard. And they
Okay.
so they have a separate state assessment
Mm-hmm.
for them as well to assess their progress. And if you have Access Points, you do get a different high school diploma. So if you have an IEP, you do not get a different diploma. So
Okay.
nothing is affected as far as that goes. Although in high school, you have the option of an 18 credit. So that does have a few differences with it, but it still can be very beneficial to students who are struggling. I also want to say that like having these different abilities
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that your kid can't do what every other kid can.
Mm-hmm.
It means that they might just need a little support. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they may not be riding just a two-wheeler bicycle. They might need the training wheels. And that, if you don't if you don't make it a big deal, if you don't point out the fact that they have training wheels, then no one else is going to. And
Mm,
they're not going to realize that about themselves, which is really important. Because, there's going to be times, probably middle school, let's be honest, when other kids aren't as nice. And
mm,
it's
hmm.
really important to start teaching your kids to just kind of ignore differences, like accept
Yeah.
everyone because you don't know what they have going on.
Hmm.
Um, and you don't want them to feel different. And
Hmm.
when you have an IEP, you may be pulled out of the classroom to do some work, and that a student without one might be like, oh, why is and so getting to go with Miss A? I want to go with Miss A, which happened because of course I made myself very popular. And it's like, I always had candy, always played games, but it's like, you want that to be the reaction rather than like anything negative. So I just think
Hmm.
it's important to kind of think about how you as an adult, how you perceive
Hmm.
kiddos that are different. Like if you're in a park, do you
Hmm.
point out a different child to your child and say like and force them to go play? No, you don't need to do that. Like, oh, go play with, this kiddo because they're in a wheelchair. No.
Hmm.
How about just go play?
Yeah.
Like, let's like make things more invisible and just encourage the
Hmm.
kids to talk and play because they won't. I mean, your kid might say to the one in a wheelchair, like, "Oh, what's that? What's that for?" They'll
Yeah.
ask their own questions. They'll be inquisitive,
Yeah.
and I think not hearing it from parents is good because it gives them a chance to talk to the kids in their own language. And kids
Mm.
describing what's happening with them to another kid is much more beneficial than a parent because the way that it's phrased
Hmm.
and worded is different.
Hmm.
I think I
Yeah.
went down a rabbit hole.
That's okay. I think I invited that rabbit hole, actually, so you're good. You're good. But that's so true, and that's something like when I'm on the playground with my son all the time, and we travel a lot, so I'm like, just go have fun, go make a new friend, go say hi or hola, like whatever, like hola, mi nombre es Declan. Like, go say hi. And that is such an important thing, like there's going to be a time and place when kids are just going to be rude. And sometimes that is on a playground. Some of those kids can be pretty aggressive, but
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there. So let's talk a little bit about the services and support that you provide and how you came into your time to talk and made your own business for all this
Yeah.
IEP stuff.
So it is time to talk IEPs. Did I get
IEPs.
that
Yes.
end there? I mean, because I'll talk about everything, but it's, the business. It's time to talk IEPs. So I started this advocacy business not too long ago, and I provide support for parents who are either you're going through the IEP process,
Mm.
you have one already, you have a 504, or you want a 504. And I provide a lot of support. I attend meetings with parents. I review documents to catch mistakes, to catch
Mm.
things that weren't put into writing, things like that. And I hold the school accountable. So
Mm.
if your student isn't in the correct placement for them, so
Okay.
in schools there are self-contained settings, which is where the more severe cases of these exceptionalities will
Okay.
go into a self-contained setting. So there are self-contained, and then there are general education, which is like the inclusion setting.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the school will put a student into self-contained, and it will not be the best place for them.
Mm.
So I help show the school that we need to push that student
Mm-hmm.
into the mainstream is what they call it, into a mainstream classroom. And maybe they need a paraprofessional with them.
Mm.
Maybe they need like an aide, a one-on-one person to be with them. But that doesn't mean, like, even if they need that, that doesn't mean that they should just be in the self-contained room because that's where paras are typically,
Mm-hmm.
because that setting is not the right setting for everyone. I mean, they can't group like all of, like, let's say autism. So it's a spectrum for a reason. They cannot say, "Oh, your kid has autism. Let's put them in the self-contained setting,"
Mm-hmm.
because that's not how it works. There are varying levels.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes like behaviors are learned in those self-contained settings that parents get frustrated by,
Mm-hmm.
and the school doesn't always do something. So that's really where I come in as that support, as the, I mean, I'm not really like a bulldog because I'm just like all about compromise,
Mm-hmm.
but I do come in with the knowledge and with a plan so that the parents can get what they want, I'll say to like a reasonable degree. That's the other part of my job, because I need families to be honest with me,
Mm-hmm.
but also be honest with themselves, because the school is a school. Like, it's not going to be able to do every single thing. No matter how much I push, there's just
Yeah.
limitations. And so sometimes that means taking your kid out of that school. There
Mm-hmm.
are so many options. I've actually found out like about like three more schools just this weekend that exist that I had no idea. There are
Ah.
so many schools that exist in this area of St. Johns County even, um, that you could try out. And it doesn't mean they're good. It just, it's an option if
Yeah.
if the school is refusing to budge on one thing that you want, that as a state even may not be provided, So it's like,
I see. Okay.
I also am here for the reality of it, to do, to get as much as they want, but to also say when to compromise on it. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
get that.
yeah,
Yeah, that I like what uh you said. I've talked to a bunch of parents of differently abled individuals and how they say that sometimes the best place for their kid is actually in a hybrid environment because they have to rise up to the level of their peers, and then they can do some subjects with their peers, whether it's math or reading or art or doesn't matter, science, and then they can go to their um, other class, self-contained class with their paraprofessional, and have that extra attention and focus
yeah,
that they need for the things that they're not strong with. And that could be like, for any kid who might be might have autism, or any other like
yeah.
neurodivergent
OHI is that
issue.
whole grouping.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, any kind of other
yeah.
neurodiversity or whatever it is.
And maybe they need the social skills group, because that is something
Yeah.
that they do in self-contained. It
Mm-hmm.
is something that's usually once a week when you have a VE teacher, but it's like it's daily in that kind of
Mm-hmm.
a setting. And
Mm-hmm.
so maybe they just need that to help them with being social.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's like if you don't, I'm a firm believer, if you don't give your child an opportunity, you'll never know what they're capable of, like
Hmm.
honestly. And kids who might need a little bit more support doesn't mean they're not capable. It's just, allowing them to rise to the challenge. That's what
Hmm.
our friend Joanne always says, and I love that.
Yep.
And I think that is so true because why not give kids the chance to show themselves and
Yeah.
to have to beat the standards or
Right.
surpass expectations, or I don't know. So I love that you said that. How can a parent support their child outside of these conventional resources?
So I would really say just stay involved, require frequent communication,
Mm,
talk to your child about their day, which is very important because they will tell you things that you need to know.
mm,
Ask for data every quarter. So, like, yes, we get report cards, but I would like to know, let's think kindergarten, how
mm-hmm,
many letters does my child know in each
mm,
quarter? Because I want to make sure that they're making progress in that area.
mm-hmm.
Because if they're not, that might be something that you need to keep in in the back of your mind, especially if they're going into first grade.
Yeah.
So that, because it doesn't mean that they need an IEP, it just means that you need to pay attention to how they grow as a reader, because maybe they struggle in that.
Mm.
So really, it's just about that communication between
Mm-hmm.
you, the teachers, the school, and between you and your child, because more often than not, like you said with your son and the shirt, more often than not, they're going to tell you what they're
Mm-hmm.
feeling. They're going to tell you what's happening at school. If they're not like, if they're not feeling good about themselves
Mm-hmm.
because they can't read like their classmates, they know, they feel it. They, it's terrible because they do understand when they can't read something that someone else can. And they'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you that if you just, are asking the right questions. And don't be afraid to schedule a meeting. Like, don't be afraid to ask a
Mm-hmm.
principal for a meeting. Don't be afraid to ask, for a 504 meeting or an IEP meeting. You know, all they can do is say no, and if they say no, you call me.
So your business was kind of born out of the fact that you saw a disconnect for parents and they needed help with
Hmm.
this whole process.
Yeah, because as you've learned during just this conversation,
Yeah.
there are so many terms and acronyms, and there's
Yeah.
so many varieties of things. It's not a cookie cutter, every kid does not have the same IEP. That's why it's individual. And so it's like having someone by your side going through
Mm-hmm.
that, making sure that all of the services that they need are added to the IEP, all of the supports, all of the accommodations, like not just the same, because some teachers do that. They just give the same kind of accommodations to every
Mm-hmm.
kid. Well, maybe your kid
Mm-hmm.
needs those, but there's also maybe two or three different ones that they
Mm-hmm.
also need. And things that you see at home are important.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are in an IEP meeting, your input is important. It should be written in the IEP. It should be part of the development of the plan. Parent input, because
Mm.
you see what's going on at home. And even though the school likes to say, oh, well, it's how it affects them in school, that's what we care about.
Mm-hmm.
How it affects them at home is also important. And it needs to be written up in that plan.
Well, yeah, it's like, well, how's the progress at home? Or maybe some kids get like stage fright and they can do it at home, but when it
Hmm.
comes to like reading out loud
A
or presenting
thousand percent.
they're just
Yeah,
gonna clam up
yeah.
but
I
not
have a kid
everybody.
who struggles with writing in the classroom, but when he gets home and he's asked like targeted questions, not just given a write about this, he can write beautifully. And
Interesting.
so it's very frustrating that educators don't always try different things.
Yeah,
That's
that
another
is
whole.
it. Yeah, because that is a
Yeah,
whoo.
but yeah, so that's why I became an advocate though, is um because I've been in hundreds of IEP meetings, and
Hmm.
um just one thing in particular is procedural safeguards. So at every single meeting, the team, or really the lead person, says, were you given a copy of procedural safeguards, which is like a 70-page document?
Oof.
Um, and then, do you have any questions? Do you understand them? I've literally never had a parent say no, but I know for certain that they have not read through them. So I'm doing a series, it's reels and it's TikToks and all of that, but I'm doing one on procedural safeguards, breaking down the whole document in like
Mm.
little, 2-minute clips, so that parents can know what it says, can understand, because it's all about their rights. That's what the
Hmm.
document is. It's all about their rights as parents. So it is really important for them to know what it says.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And if I was handed a 70-page document, just looking at that would overwhelm me.
exactly, exactly. And it's small writing. It's like the smallest
Oh
little writing
gosh.
too, of course.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
so it really could be like 140 pages.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
gosh.
exactly.
Ah. let's talk about a little bit about your partnership with Ability Tree First Coast. How do you support this organization, and why were you compelled to work with them?
So when I first got started, Ability Tree had posted one of their events,
Mm-hmm.
and they do a lot of social events
Mm.
for families with students with special needs. And I think it is just fabulous. Like, that really drew me to the organization because I think that students need, or kids need to be in environments where they can socialize with their other
Mm.
kids that aren't it's not in school. It's not, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like a forced thing. It's just a fun little area. And because it's specific to students with different abilities,
Mm-hmm.
it's a safe space,
Mm-hmm.
it's a safe space for everyone. And it includes their siblings and their families. Like, I just really think that that is an amazing thing to do, and to provide that to this community. It's so great. And so I was really drawn to her, and I reached out, and I just was like, hey, I would love to partner with you on some things, and just kind of like speak with you, and learn more about what you do, and see how it can kind of go with what I do. So we chatted, and it was such a great conversation. She was like so helpful. She gave me so many different um, like events that were coming up, things that I could sponsor, things that I could be a vendor at.
Mm.
And it just really it really helped me. And that's who she is. She
Yeah.
helps.
Yep.
Oh,
Absolutely. No, that's it. I've actually taken my son, who doesn't have any, special needs that we're aware of at this point in time. And I've had him just like come and hang out at the events just so he can get used to being around different kids.
that's amazing. Like
Yeah.
that. I want more parents to do that, because
Me too.
I want the word to get out, that this is going on, and it's a great thing. Like, we just did spring bingo, and she had a cotton candy machine.
Oh, so
She
fun.
had, yeah, there were just fun activities, and then of course there was bingo. Like, who doesn't like playing bingo? Um, and everything being different. Like, each event is different. There's like Disney trivia.
Mm-hmm.
She has a 5K coming up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just blown away by all of the things that she does for this community. And I just really enjoy being a part of it, and being able to support her by sponsoring some events, and to join her, setting up, being there as a vendor, or just being
Mm-hmm.
there to, just help and support. I just love that.
Yeah, it's a great organization too. I'm a little biased. Is there anything else that we should know about IEPs, or do we miss anything?
I don't I don't think so. I think, I mean, other than all of the rabbit holes we could have gone down, I definitely think that we covered, enough to make parents feel more informed, and have some ideas on maybe what to look for.
Mm.
And they can always look me up. I'm
Yeah,
at
which
yeah, time to talk IEPs.com is my website. So they can always go there and reach out to me. Even if they just have a question, if you just have one question,
mhm.
feel free to send me an email. It's time to talk IEPs at gmail.com. So you can just send me an email, and I'll happily talk.
And then what about your social handles? Do you have, I know you have a
They're all the
couple.
same. So everything
Okay.
is time to talk IEPs. Yep. That's Insta, it's Facebook, it's TikTok, and yeah, that's it.
How many? Yeah,
That's
that's
enough.
enough, right? I can't even keep on top of those things, right? Oh my gosh. Well, Megan, thank you so much for your time and enlightening us with all of this information. I think it's so important that parents understand what's accessible to them, what rights they have, and how they can best support their child who may, or, if they're struggling in any way, shape, or form at school, that might need just a little extra support to be successful in the classroom. So thank you so much for your insight and your knowledge. I'm the mom who knows nada. My name is Brianna, and I hope y'all are having fun learning things you didn't